Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the world of certified document copies.
Sounds pretty dry.
Yeah, maybe not the most exciting thing you've ever heard of, but stick with us.
It gets interesting, I promise.
It does, because, you sent in a whole bunch of questions about getting documents certified. So
Right.
we found this great article from the National Notary Association.
Oh, yeah.
It's packed with real-world examples, questions from people just like you.
Really practical stuff, very insightful.
Okay, so quick question. Did you know that in some states, notaries can't even certify copies?
It's true.
Or that there are rules about using a copy of your passport for like a visa application?
Or for another country.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it can get pretty complex.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk about how digital documents are changing things up a little bit.
A lot, actually.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll understand the basics of copy certification and be ready to ask the right questions.
You all know what to do.
All right, so let's break it down. What does copy certification actually mean?
Well, at its most basic, it means a notary public carefully compares a copy of a document to the original.
Okay.
They're checking that the copy is accurate and complete, and then they attach a notarial certificate to that copy.
So it's more than just making a copy at like the library or something.
Well, yeah, much more.
Okay, so what else should we know?
Well, one of the biggest things is that copy certification isn't the same everywhere.
What?
Each state has its own laws about it.
Wow, I never even thought of that.
Yeah, so there's no single guide for the whole country.
So it's like a patchwork of different rules.
Exactly, and it can get pretty confusing.
All right, well, let's look at some specifics then. The article mentioned some states with really different approaches, like Michigan and Nebraska notaries can't certify copies at all there.
Nope, not at all. There are a couple of the states that have decided not to allow that as part of being a notary.
Huh. So you'd have to find a different way to get a copy certified in those states.
Yeah, you'd need to find another option.
Then there's California, and they're kind of the opposite. Well, the article said that California notaries can only certify certain documents like powers of attorney.
Oh, right. California is much stricter. They limit what documents can be certified.
Okay, so some states are really open, some are really strict, and some don't even allow it. Wow. So are there any other states with like unusual rules?
Well, Florida has an interesting one. Notaries there can't certify copies of vital records if the office that issued the record can make a copy for you.
So, like, if you need a copy of your birth certificate, you'd have to go back to the place where it was issued.
Exactly. They want to control those records themselves.
That catches people off guard sometimes. They go to a notary expecting to get a copy certified, and it turns out they can't.
It happens more often than you'd think, which is why it's so important to know the rules beforehand.
Right. So the first step is always figure out what your state allows before you do anything else. What about you? Have you ever been surprised by a state's rules on this?
You know, I have. It
Yeah.
just goes to show that this process, even though it seems simple, can be really tricky.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into some of those real-world situations from the National Notary Association article, because they had a ton of interesting questions, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have probably wondered about this stuff too. For example, someone in Massachusetts asked if a notary could certify a copy of a German passport.
That's a great example because it brings up international documents. And the good news is that in Massachusetts, as long as the notary can look at the original document, they can certify a copy of it.
So it doesn't matter if the document isn't in English.
As long as the notary can compare the copy to the original, it's fine.
Okay, that's good to know. How about this one? Someone from Pennsylvania asked if a notary can certify a copy of a green card.
Yes, a Pennsylvania notary can certify a copy of a green card. That's a pretty common request, actually.
So are there like special rules for different kinds of documents then?
Definitely. Some documents, like vital records, are treated differently because the government agencies that issue them have very strict rules about who can make certified copies.
All right, we talked about that with Florida earlier. But it sounds like for things like passports and green cards, it's usually okay as long as the notary can compare the copy to the original.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
But it's always a good idea to double-check the specific state laws just to be safe.
Good advice. Okay, this next question is about vital records again. Someone in Colorado wanted to know if a notary could certify a copy of their grandmother's international birth certificate. The grandmother lives in the U.S., but the birth certificate is from another country.
That's a tough one. Vital records can be tricky for notaries. In Colorado and most states, actually, a notary wouldn't be able to certify a copy of an international birth certificate. Those are usually handled by the country that issued the original document.
So you'd have to contact like an embassy or something.
Exactly. They would have the most up-to-date information on how to get a certified copy. It's also worth noting that some countries might have special requirements for document authentication beyond what a U.S. notary can do.
So the bottom line with vital records is go straight to the source. Okay, now let's talk about something I think a lot of people are curious about: digital documents. Yeah. How does copy certification work when you're dealing with something that's electronic?
That's a really good question, and honestly, it's an area that's still evolving. A lot of states are starting to allow notaries to certify printed copies of electronic documents.
So you're not really certifying the digital file itself, but a physical copy of it.
Right. Think of it like taking a picture of your computer screen.
Yeah.
The picture is a tangible representation of what's on the screen, but it's not the screen itself.
That's a great way to explain it. So is every state okay with this idea of certifying a printed copy of a digital document?
It's still changing, but a lot of states are adopting rules for it. Arizona, for example, has been allowing it since 2022.
So in Arizona, you could get a printed copy of an email certified.
Yes, if the notary follows the correct procedures.
Interesting. Are there states that handle it differently?
Definitely. Alaska, for instance, only lets notaries certify tangible copies of electronic records. So they specifically say you can't certify the digital file itself.
Okay, so even with digital documents, there are still a lot of differences from state to state. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where we can just certify the digital documents directly?
It's definitely possible. As technology improves, especially things like blockchain and digital signatures, it might become more common to verify and authenticate documents entirely online.
That would be interesting.
Right. But there are still a lot of legal and practical challenges to figure out before that happens.
Yeah, like making sure digital documents haven't been changed without anyone knowing.
Exactly. So for now, it's probably best to stick with printed copies when you need to get something certified. But what if someone needs a document certified and their state doesn't allow notaries to do it, or the type of document isn't something a notary can certify?
Right, like what are their options then?
There's something called copy certification by document custodian that can sometimes work.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I understand how it works.
So basically, the person who has the original document, the custodian, signs a statement saying that the copy is accurate. Then a notary notarizes the custodian's signature on that statement.
So the notary isn't directly checking the copy, but they're checking the custodian's statement.
Exactly. It's like adding a layer of trust. The custodian is vouching for the copy, and then the notary is vouching for the custodian.
That's a clever way to do it. It's like a chain of trust.
Right. It's a good option if you can't get a copy certified directly by a notary.
This has been so helpful. We've covered so many different situations and really gone deep into copy certification. I feel like I have a much better understanding of it now.
Me too. There's a lot more to it than people realize.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, are there any other common mistakes people make or things they should watch out for with copy certification?
One thing to remember is that notaries have limits. They're not lawyers, and they can't give legal advice. They can answer questions about the notarization process, but they shouldn't be telling people what documents mean or giving legal opinions.
That's a good point. So if someone isn't sure what kind of notarization they need, or if they need a copy certified at all, they should talk to a lawyer.
That's always the best thing to do.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've covered so much ground and learned about all sorts of situations. So what are the key takeaways you think people should keep in mind?
I think the most important thing is that copy certification isn't as simple as it seems. There are so many state-specific rules and details that it's really important to do your research and understand what applies where you are.
Definitely. And don't forget, when in doubt, go straight to the source, the agency that issued the original document. They'll be able to give you the most accurate information about getting a certified copy.
Couldn't agree more.
And remember, it's okay to ask the notary questions, but their job is to verify identities and witness signatures, not to give legal advice.
Right. They're there to make the process official, but they can't tell you what to do.
All right, well, I think our listeners are ready for part 2, where we'll wrap up our exploration of copy certification and give you some final thoughts and resources to help you confidently navigate this whole process. Stick with us.
We'll be right back. It's amazing how often something comes up that just makes you realize, wow, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye.
Right. Okay, so I want to look at some real-world situations from that article from the National Notary Association, because they had so many great questions.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of our listeners have had these same questions too. Like someone in Massachusetts asked if a notary could certify a copy of a German passport.
That's a good one because it involves international documents, and in Massachusetts, the answer is yes, as long as the notary can see the original document.
Okay, so it's fine if it's not in English.
Right.
Okay.
The focus is on whether the copy is accurate, not what language the document is in.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How about this? Someone in Pennsylvania wanted to know if a notary could certify a copy of a green card.
Yes, they can. That's a pretty common one.
So it sounds like different documents might have different rules.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Some documents like vital records are often treated differently because the agencies that issue them have strict rules about certified copies.
Right, we talked about that with Florida earlier.
Yeah.
But it seems like for things like passports and green cards, it's usually okay as long as the notary can compare the copy to the original.
Yeah, in most cases. But it's always smart to double-check the specific state laws just to be sure.
Always good advice. Okay, now this next question is about vital records again. Someone in Colorado wanted to know if a notary could certify a copy of their grandmother's birth certificate. The grandmother lives in the U.S., but the birth certificate is from another country.
Ooh, that's tricky. As we've seen, vital records can be a minefield for notaries.
Yeah.
In most states, including Colorado, a notary wouldn't be able to certify that kind of birth certificate.
So what should they do?
They'd need to contact the agency in the country where the birth certificate was issued.
Makes sense. So
Yeah.
they'd need to go to the source.
Exactly. They would know how to get a certified copy. And keep in mind that some countries may require additional steps for document authentication beyond what a U.S. notary can do.
Got it. So the takeaway is, if you're dealing with vital records, go straight to the issuing agency.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people are wondering about: digital documents.
Mm-hmm.
How does all this work with electronic files?
That's a great question, and it's something that's still kind of evolving.
Okay.
More and more states are allowing notaries to certify printed copies of electronic documents.
So you're basically certifying a paper copy of a digital file.
Right, like
Yeah.
if you took a screenshot on your computer and printed it out, you'd be certifying the printout, not the screenshot itself.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So is every state on board with this?
It's still a work in progress, but a lot of states are moving in that direction. Arizona, for instance, has been allowing this since 2022.
So you could get a printed copy of an email certified in Arizona.
Yeah, as long as they follow the right procedures.
That's interesting. Are there any states that handle it differently?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Alaska, for example, only allows certification for tangible copies, meaning paper printouts of electronic records.
Huh. So they specifically say you can't certify the digital file.
Right.
Wow. So even with digital documents, there's no one-size-fits-all approach?
Nope, still a lot of variation out there.
So do you think we'll ever get to a point where we can just certify digital documents directly without having to print them out?
You know, I think it's possible as technology gets better, particularly with things like blockchain and digital signatures, it might become more and more feasible to verify documents entirely online.
That would be pretty cool.
Right. But there are still some hurdles to overcome, like making sure the digital documents haven't been tampered with.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue.
It is. So for now, I'd say stick with printed copies when it comes to certification.
Good advice.
Yep.
But what if someone needs a document certified, but their state doesn't allow notaries to do it?
Or what if the document itself isn't something notaries can certify?
Right, like what are the options then?
Well, there's a process called copy certification by document custodian. That might be a workaround.
I've heard of that, but I don't really know how it works.
So the person who has the original document, the custodian, signs a statement saying that the copy is a true and accurate copy. Then a notary notarizes the custodian's signature.
So the notary isn't looking at the copy itself, but they're verifying that the custodian said it's accurate.
Exactly. It's adding an extra layer of verification.
I see. So it's like a chain of trust. The custodian vouches for the copy, and the notary vouches for the custodian.
That's a great way to put it. It's a good alternative if you can't get a direct certification from a notary.
This has been so informative. We've covered a lot of ground today and really dug deep into copy certification.
I agree.
I feel like we've gone from not knowing much about it to being mini experts.
Me too. And honestly, I'm a little surprised by how many different situations and rules there are.
Right. Before we move on, are there any other common mistakes or things people should watch out for when it comes to copy certification?
One thing that's really important to remember is that notaries have limits. They're not lawyers.
Right.
So they can't give legal advice.
Yeah.
They can answer questions about the notarization process, but they shouldn't be explaining what documents mean or giving legal opinions.
Good point. So if someone isn't sure what kind of notarization they need or if they even need a document certified, they should talk to an attorney.
Absolutely.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've covered so much ground and learned about so many different things. What do you think are the most important things for people to remember about copy certification?
I think the biggest takeaway is that it's not as straightforward as you might think. Those state laws we talked about, they're really important. Before you do anything, you need to figure out what's allowed in your state.
Location.
Exactly. The National Notary Association website has a great section that breaks down each state's regulations. I highly recommend checking it out.
Definitely bookmark that. And what about vital records? What's the best advice there?
Don't even try to guess. Just go directly to the agency that issued the document. They'll know exactly what you need to do to get a certified copy.
No guesswork needed.
Right.
And one final reminder, notaries are there to verify and witness, but they're not lawyers.
Yes, they make things official, but they can't give you legal advice.
So if you need help figuring out what to do legally, talk to an attorney.
Always a good idea.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a really solid understanding of certified document copies.
I hope so.
They're ready to ask the right questions, avoid common pitfalls, and navigate this process with confidence.
Exactly.
Preparation is key.
Absolutely. And don't forget, you can always go back to that National Notary Association article for more details and examples. We'll put a link in the show notes.
It's a great resource.
That wraps up part 2 of our deep dive into the world of certified document copies. What do you say we take a quick break and come back to finish things up?
Sounds good. We'll be right back after this. And we're back. We spent the last couple of parts of this deep dive really getting into the weeds of certified document copies.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
I feel like we could practically start our own copy certification business now.
Almost.
So as we wrap things up, what are the big things our listeners should remember about this whole process?
Well, I think the most important thing is to always remember those state laws we talked about.
Right.
That's the foundation of everything. Before you even think about getting a copy certified, you absolutely have to know what the rules are in your state.
So it all comes back to location.
Exactly. And luckily, the National Notary Association website has a really good breakdown of each state's rules.
Yeah, that's a great resource.
Definitely. And when it comes to vital records like birth certificates or marriage licenses,
Those are always tricky.
the best advice I can give is to always go straight to the issuing agency.
Yeah, don't even try to guess.
Right. They'll have the most accurate and up-to-date information on how to get a certified copy.
And remember, notaries are awesome, but they're not lawyers.
Exactly.
They can help you with the notarization process, but they can't give you legal advice. So if you're not sure what kind of notarization you need, or if you need a copy certified at all, talk to a lawyer.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. It's amazing how many things can affect this seemingly simple process.
It really is. And as technology keeps changing, I think we're going to see even more changes in how this all works.
Right, like those digital documents we talked about.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how things evolve.
Well, I think we've given our listeners all the tools they need to understand certified document copies and how to get them.
I hope so.
They know what questions to ask, how to avoid common problems, and how to navigate this process with confidence.
And remember, you can always go back to that National Notary Association article for more information and examples.
Yeah, we'll include a link to that in the show notes.
Definitely a helpful resource.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of certified document copies. Thanks for joining us, and as always, stay curious.